You might remember that when Barack Obama was running for president in 2008, there were some people who supported the conspiracy theory that Obama had secretly been born in Kenya. The people who supported this so-called birther movement argued that this would have made Obama unable to run for president, since according to them, this would mean he was not a natural-born citizen of the United States, which under the rules of the Constitution, you must be in order to run for president. However, to be a natural-born citizen, you simply need to be born within the boundaries of the United States or have at least one American parent. For instance, even though Ted Cruz was born in Canada and John McCain in the American-controlled Panama Canal Zone, since both had at least one American parent, they were both able to run for president without any issue, which incidentally also means that even if Obama had been born in Kenya, because his mother is from Kansas, he would still have been able to run for president. But this was not the first time that a presidential candidate's ancestry had been called into question during a presidential campaign. During the 1920 presidential campaign, what might have been called the original birther movement sprang up to challenge the candidacy of Republican candidate Warren G. Harding, a senator from Ohio, as he ran against the Democratic candidate, Governor James M. Cox, who was also from Ohio. The Warren-Harding conspiracy was just as baseless as the Obama-Kenya theory, but was very different. Instead of claiming Harding was born outside the United States, some people claimed that Harding secretly had a black ancestor, his great-grandfather, which in 1920, at the height of segregation, was a very serious and potentially damaging accusation to make. But rather than being spread by conspiracy theorists online, these rumors were spread by none other than Warren G. Harding's own father-in-law, Amos Kling. When Amos's daughter, the future First Lady Florence Kling, decided to marry Warren G. Harding, Amos vehemently opposed the match, refusing to even attend the wedding ceremony. After the wedding, Amos decided to get his revenge on Harding for marrying his daughter by spreading the rumor that Harding secretly had black ancestry. One time, Amos even called Harding the N-word. This enraged Harding's father, George Harding, so much that the two father-in-laws openly fought in the street. Amos had not actually created the rumor, since it was long-held town gossip that Warren Harding's great-grandmother had married a black man, although George Harding had always insisted the rumor was started by a thief who had been caught trying to break into the house of the great-grandmother in question and had started the rumor as an act of petty revenge. But it wasn't until Harding was chosen as the Republican nominee for the 1920 presidential election that this town gossip was turned into a national sensation. An eccentric character named Professor William Estabrook Chancellor, a professor of political science at Worcester College in Ohio, took a passionate dislike to Harding after hearing rumors of his supposed black ancestry. Chancellor was an avowed racist even by the standards of the time, having lost a previous teaching job in the Washington, D.C. school system for lying and fomenting racial dissension. Chancellor, as a Democrat, hated what he saw as Harding's conciliatory position towards African Americans. Harding was by no means a civil rights leader and did not oppose segregation, but advocated for equality before the law, calling for anti-lynching legislation numerous times and the protection of black people's rights within the South. Harding explained his position in a speech after his nomination, saying, "I would not be a fit president if I did not tell you precisely the same thing in the South as I would say in the North. I want you to know that I believe in equality before the law. That is one of the guarantees of the American Constitution. You cannot give one right to the white man and deny the same right to the black man. But while I stand for that principle, I want you in Oklahoma to know that that does not mean the white man and the black man must experience the enjoyment of their rights in each other's company." But even this moderate position was too much for Chancellor. Chancellor, despite being a Democrat, attended the 1920 Republican National Convention in Chicago. After Harding was confirmed as the Republican nominee at the convention, Chancellor even persuaded himself that Harding had only won the nomination because the black delegates at the convention did vote for Harding because they were told that he had Negro blood, and the second he was elected, that he would appoint Negroes to many more offices than any other president had ever done. Chancellor then traveled to Harding's hometown of Marion, Ohio, to investigate the rumors himself. There he was told the story of Harding's supposed black great-grandmother, which meant that under this theory, that Harding himself was 1/8 black. Chancellor even got 4 people to swear affidavits that they knew the story to be true. Chancellor then published a pamphlet titled The Harding Family Tree, which explained the whole situation, detailing Harding's supposed black ancestry as well as the previously mentioned accusations and objections of Harding's father-in-law. But this was not the ramblings of just one man in a small town. Mysteriously, thousands of these pamphlets were distributed in the dead of night all around Ohio, and even distributed on trains in places as far away as Kansas and Alabama. And amazingly, 250,000 of these pamphlets were discovered in San Francisco alone. A second pamphlet written by Chancellor, titled "To the Men and Women of America," explained in more detail Chancellor's opposition and hatred of Harding, saying, "Warren Gamaliel Harding is not a white man," and "Are we ready to make the experiment of trusting the presidency of this republic to this hybrid man? Shall America be a white man's land? For I believe the red man, the yellow man, and the black man, one and all, are better off under the social control of the white man." But Chancellor alone didn't have the funds or connections to distribute thousands of pamphlets all over the United States, which begs the question, who was backing his theories? Some suspected Chancellor had traveled to the White House and asked Democratic President Woodrow Wilson to endorse his theories, but President Wilson refused, saying, "It will never be used with my consent. We cannot go into a man's genealogy. We must base our campaign on principles, not backstairs gossip." But Wilson, who was by this time bedridden from a stroke, was not the Democratic nominee. That was James M. Cox, also from Ohio. Cox himself could not use the rumors for political gain, however, since his first wife was also a Harding, and this could have potentially meant that his family could have also been put under suspicion by the scandal. Nevertheless, there is evidence that the Ohio Democratic Committee had decided to quietly endorse Chancellor's theories and help distribute the pamphlets. A member of Cox's election campaign was found to be distributing some in Columbus, Ohio, and a Democratic clerk in Pennsylvania, Harvey L. Bowser, was even arrested for handing out some of the pamphlets. As for Chancellor himself, he would eventually lose his job at Worcester College over the pamphlets, even though he made some half-hearted attempts to say he had no knowledge of them, but by now the allegations were a national story. Warren Harding himself never denied the claims, probably because he knew doing so would have only brought them further attention, but also because he himself was unsure if they were true or not, saying to a friend, "How do I know? One of my ancestors might have jumped the fence." But Harding's father, who had dealt with the rumors for his entire adult life, was less subdued, saying to a Democratic judge he thought was spreading the rumors, "If I believed you had done that, I would smash your face." On election day in 1920, the scandal hardly mattered. Harding won the biggest popular vote margin of any president since James Monroe ran unopposed in 1820, being 26 percentage points ahead of James Cox, and even winning the traditionally Democratic southern state of Tennessee. Despite losing his job over the conspiracy theory, for Chancellor, his problems were not over. On election day, with news of the Republican victory spreading, a small crowd armed with shotguns decided to go to Chancellor's home and get revenge for the trouble he had caused. But before this group arrived, some of Chancellor's ex-students warned him about them and he was able to escape. Eventually, after being threatened with arrest by the postal authorities for continuing to spread the false accusations, Chancellor was forced to flee to Canada for a year. As for Harding, he would serve just over 2 years as president before dying in office. A DNA test in 2015 would finally conclude that there was a 95% chance that Harding had no black ancestry within 4 generations, which finally put an end to the speculation and conspiracy theories surrounding this interesting but often forgotten American president. I hope you enjoyed this video and thanks for watching. If you'd like to see more from Newsreel History and help more content get made, please consider subscribing and I'll see you next time.